If you feel like your finances are constantly tight, no matter how hard you budget, you're not alone.
Who is to blame? Yourself and your spending habits, or are there larger forces keeping you down?
Today, we'll look at some crazy statistics, talk about practical steps to get out of debt, but more importantly, how to prevent financial stress from robbing the joys of life from your family. Lastly, if you're not struggling financially and you have lots of money, that's okay. We have a challenge for you at the end that you'll want to hear. This is the Balanced Family Podcast with Ben
and Jessica. There's a lot to balance when you have a family: marriage, kids, health, career, while you're trying to balance all the opinions out there on how to do things right.
Today, we'll cut through the noise, tackle hard questions, and share stories as we try to get to the heart of the things that really matter. All right, I'm going to start out with some stats. And a lot of this is stuff we're familiar with, but it's basically about how it's hard to be middle class, harder to be middle class
than it
used to be.
Mm-hmm. We have stats to prove it.
This episode is called How to Be Broke and Live Off Credit Cards If You Must. And I just want to say that might have been triggering for some people. We're absolutely not condoning like living off credit cards. That's not the point of this podcast. It was meant to be, the title was meant to be funny, and we're also not saying like how to be poor. What we're actually talking about is like how, like internally, like how do you actually carry yourself and your family and your marriage when you're like super stressed financially? Because that's something that a lot of people can relate with. We can definitely relate with.
We can most certainly relate to
We
this.
know what that was like. But before I get into just some of our journey, some of these stats that just discussed is how much our world has changed recently. We'll first start with just like global wealth inequality, which it's talked about a lot in the news, but it's still pretty staggering. When you look at the world, 45.6% of all global wealth is owned by the top 1% of individuals.
Wait, say that again.
The top 1% of population
like 1%.
Owns like 46% of global wealth.
Wow. That's nuts.
It's really almost like, it's so like fairy tale-ish numbers. You can't really grab a hold of it.
Right.
The bottom 50% of the population of the world owns less than 2% of global wealth. So that's just outrageous to think about. The wealth of the billionaires of the world has grown by $5 trillion. That was just from 2020 to 2021. Some of the stats I'm looking at, I know these are kind of old. There's probably more recent stuff. What's significant about that, Jessica, that was the largest increase ever recorded for billionaires' wealth growing.
Wow.
Pretty wild. Let's see what else. Let's talk about just the U.S. because you're like, well, globally, understand like there's major inequality. Well, even in the U.S., the top 1% of households own 34% of U.S. wealth. And that's up significantly from the 80s. And the bottom 50% of the United States only holds 2.5% of U.S. wealth.
Wow. So it really follows pretty closely with the global trend.
The trend, yeah, exactly. The top 10% of Americans get, and this is income. This is not wealth. There's a difference between wealth and income. Like your wealth is all your assets, your investments, all that stuff, your real estate, whatever. So rich people have a lot more wealth because they have a lot more assets. But even if you look at income, like just wages, the top 10% of salary earners receive nearly 50% of all U.S. income.
Wow.
So that's pretty wild if you were just to like visualize that, taking 100 people in the room and you take 10 of them and you give them half of all the money. And then the rest of the half, we got to split up whatever's left. Pretty wild. And so that's obviously like, there's issues with that, but that's a systematic thing that's just like beyond our control, unfortunately. And here's some more stuff I'm going to talk about with just like middle class, but I do want to start out with just one piece of good news because a lot of this is going to sound like bad news. One piece of good news is that life expectancy has increased from 1960. Even though all this wealth inequality is getting worse. So that's one good thing. Of course, there's new data saying
we're living longer and we're poorer.
Yeah, we're living longer and poorer. Great. And technology access has made just the world the global economy a lot more accessible. I mean, you can be in Turkey and start a company with the internet that impacts the world. Like that's pretty unique, and if you look at more like consumer products, even though like we're kind of poor as a middle class, there's so many things that are just cheaper because of globalization. So you actually are able to enjoy more comforts and conveniences in that regard. But let's talk more about just like how hard it is to be middle class. So in 1960, so we're talking about boomers basically, when they were our age.
All you boomers,
All you boomers out there,
that everything was just as hard in the 60s as it is now. Listen up.
Yeah. So median home price was 2 times the median annual household income.
Okay.
But for today, it's over 4 times the median annual household income.
So it's doubled.
It's doubled.
Over doubled.
Yeah. Wages. If you just look at wages, all these numbers I'm sharing are inflation adjusted. Okay. For the boomers, the hourly wage in 1979 was about $27 in like today's dollars. And now $28.50. So it's increased a little bit, but that's over a long period of time. Are you tracking with me?
Yeah.
Am I making
So you're
sense?
basically saying that we're getting paid the same, but everything's more expensive.
Exactly. Yes. So now let's talk about debt before we talk about our journey, which is also alarming. So same stat, boomers at age 30, 1990, average consumer debt was $10,000. And this is all adjusted for inflation. Now it's $27,000, 170% increase. One of the biggest factors of this is student loan debt. So like that was just not really a significant factor decades ago. And now like all millennials are strapped with all this student loan debt. Credit card debt, though, is also a lot higher, and auto loans are a lot higher. So like boomers, like when they were our age, the average car loan was like $8,000. That's adjusted for inflation. And now the average loan is like $20,000 plus. Yeah. So everyone is like experiencing more debt in today's economy. And we know from just like being in this generation, like how many more women work, not because they necessarily want to. You have to in a lot of homes, in a lot of different cities, that need is even greater.
Yeah, I think that, so when we first got married, we were double income, no kids, living the dream.
Dink life.
Dinks. We were both public school teachers. We both worked at districts that had a good salary. What I mean is that there's other areas, especially in our state, where you say you're a public school teacher and everyone's like, oh, how did you survive? We worked at school districts that had pretty decent wages. And so we were doing really well. I ended up making a career shift where I ended up working for a different school that was more of a startup. That actually our kids currently go to this school as well. I was helping out. And so I took a pretty significant pay cut. We always joke that we got married and then our pay just slowly decreased over time because then I had kids and then we decided that it would be best for me to stay home full time with them. And so we went from having my full income when we first were married to me literally I made a little bit of money. I edited a magazine. So I would get, I don't know, like a couple $100 every other month. But that was basically, my work was unpaid labor, right? Basically went to one income, a public school teacher income. So it wasn't like you were working for, an engineering firm. And so there were a lot of challenges when we had that season of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we both grew up middle class, like both of us, probably pretty similar, like economic status or whatever. And we're used to that kind of lifestyle. And both of our moms didn't have careers.
Worked on and off, but weren't career
same.
women.
And so it was like, that to us was kind of like, it wasn't like we believed, yes, the mom must stay home. That actually wasn't it. It was just something that we really liked about our moms, and you wanted to do that.
Well, actually, I will say I was actually incredibly career driven.
That's true.
I was a career lady. It actually was a shift in me.
It changed over time.
When I had kids, your world changes as a mom and you begin to prioritize other things. And my career and my desire to, have this amazing career just honestly went to the back burner. Yeah. And I think that happens not for every mom. I don't think that that's like a universal experience, but I do know that a lot of moms experience that. Yeah. And so, for us, we had to kind of make a decision of like, okay, what do we do? Do I continue to work and we sustain our lifestyle that we had as dinks? Or do I stay home and we massively change the way that we live because we're like literally not going to having half the income that we had before.
So anyway, whenever you started staying home, I mean, man, things got tight, so tight,
really tight.
And to the point where we did have to start using credit cards.
We did.
Dude, like we were thrifty, dude. Like our first car was so cheap. I mean, everything we did was as cheap as possible. We were never in a like splurge mindset.
No.
Like we literally, everything we did was as cheap as possible. And we still could not pay our bills. And we had to swipe credit cards. What's amazing is that we never paid credit card interest.
Ben was a magician with this. Yeah. This is like
I rolled over that balance to all those intro APRs over and over. I don't know how many years it was. I have never.
We had so many credit cards open that we would just like.
I don't think I've ever paid interest on a credit card.
No.
And for that period of time, man, we were living off of. I remember learning some of these stats I shared earlier about just how much harder it is to be middle class. And I remember like feeling so relieved, like, wow, it's not my fault. It's not that I picked a horrible job or that we're consumeristic. Like it actually, like living expenses are harder.
Well, and when you compare it to how we grew up, it's like we had moms, they were not major income earners in our home. And it's like, okay, what are we doing wrong here? Like, why can't we also be able to do that? Yeah. And I think that was difficult. And I really wanted to have the option to be home with my kids. And honestly, I think it helped me realize how significant of a decision that was for us when we made it, because we had a lot more forces up against us than even our parents did. Yeah. And it was a massive sacrifice because I could have just gone and got a job, honestly. Like I could have just gone.
Good job. We both had degrees.
We would have, I would have been able to make a good amount of money. It wasn't even an issue of I was trying to get work and I couldn't or anything like that. It was genuinely like a values choice for us where it was like, I want to be home. We also, and we mentioned her a lot. I had a kiddo who had some health conditions and issues. And so I like knew it was like, I'm not going to be able to really hold down like a full-time job with our situation. And so the decision was kind of made for us, but then at the same time, we did have to kind of consciously say, okay, we're going to purposefully not have a lot of money.
We're going to purposely be poor.
Be poor. And
and knowing that was like a deliberate decision, I remember us reminding ourselves of that, like, wait a minute, we chose this, and it was like, oh yeah, it was relieving. Then it was like, oh yeah, we could change our situation we wanted to. And then when we remembered why we did it, it reinvigorated us. Mm-hmm. And then our focus went from like just survival mode to let's find contentment where we're at.
Yeah.
And I feel like God did some deep work in our hearts during that season that wasn't just about learning to trust God, that was involved, and like God to meet our needs, but actually spoke a lot to us about contentment and really the love of money. Like Jesus said, the love of money is the root of all evil. And when you read that, it's usually like, oh yeah, that applies to rich people. But the thing is you can be poor and love money.
Right.
And that be a driver inside of your heart that fuels so much stress and anxiety and ambition, even if you don't have any money. And, you and I have worked in school districts where in a high poverty environment, and you can kind of see, I don't want to say it's more so, but even with like high poverty kids, like they can be infatuated with like things and like fast cars and like people with money, like infatuated with that.
Or becoming football stars.
Yeah.
Because they want to make money. And
they don't ever want to be poor again.
Right.
But at the core of the human heart is the same thing that Christ talked about, and that's the love of money. It's dangerous. And it was stealing the joy out of our home, just constantly being so focused on that just survival process.
Right. Yeah. And I think for me, it really was this question, like I was saying earlier, of like, am I going to make money be my number one priority? And I think that's really honestly what I see a lot of couples when they're transitioning into having kids, because couples who are double income, no kids, they typically do okay. Even if you have a low earning wage, you can kind of scrape by. But it's when you have kids that everything changes, because it's like, if you're going to work, you have to pay for daycare. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of women I know who they work to pay for the daycare. Yeah. And I think for me, it was this, okay, am I going to love money and honestly just comfort so much that I'm going to completely disregard this blaring thing inside of me that is saying you need to stay home with your kids. And again, like, I'm not saying that working and having kids is bad. I'm not saying that
Absolutely
at all.
Not.
It really is like a very personal decision. And I have a lot of friends who are like, hey, I could never be a stay-at-home mom. Like my best friend, she's like, heck no. Like I love having work, and really she's like, I like having both. I like being able to stay home and work some. And I did that for a period as well. But I think really looking at your values and your priorities and really asking yourself, what do I want to 40 years from now look back on and say like I prioritized? Because we don't get this time back. Mm-hmm. Like I would never have gotten that time back with my kids, And I knew it was like, I would regret so much making a fear-based decision, because that really would be what it would be.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm afraid of not having enough money, or I really just don't want to have to deal with that hardship. And then looking back and being like, gosh, now my kids are out of the house.
Yeah.
And that time is gone. I just had this real understanding inside of me, even as I have my master's degree, like I'm a very educated person. I've always have had high career ambition. And I just knew it was like, there's going to be a time for that.
Yeah.
Like I am going to be able to do that again. It's not like everything is lost, because I stayed home for, it was like 5 years. It wasn't even that long in the grand scheme of things. My kids are now in school and they're gone all day.
Yeah.
I don't see them all day unless they're homesick or from snow days or, all the things that happen.
Between 3 kids is like every week.
Almost every week. But I don't know. I think that this is such a big decision that I think a lot of people, they just look at it very common sensely of just like, oh, it's common sense for you to just make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. Cause like you're saying, the love of money really is the root of all evil. And I don't know, for me, it's really just looking at what I'm prioritizing and looking at the things that I really hold up in esteem and ensuring that the right things are being prioritized.
Yeah. And comparison is the thief of joy. For me in that period of time, like a lot of the stress wasn't actually that our needs weren't being met, because honestly they were. And honestly, being especially Americans is like, you could be poor in America. Your basic needs are taken care of.
I think you and I have a very unique perspective because we both have been out of the country a lot.
Yeah, you go travel and you're like,
people
then you see real poverty on another level. No social welfare system, no safety net. Anyway, the point I'm making is that when I look back, I can see that a lot of the stress was because of my expectations, not because of my needs actually not being met. If I was to step back and like be honest with myself, it's like, oh, I'm actually just frustrated that I don't get some of the things that I want or get to go on some of the vacations.
Cool vacations.
Right.
We had a lot of friends that did a lot of vacations, a lot of really cool stuff. And we did not.
Yeah. We had a great life early in those poor days. But the point is like, you have to be aware of your heart and what's actually driving you in some of those frustrations. Another thing was like, I remember I was around a lot of anti-debt voices and culture. And that's like the irony of America is like everybody's strapped with debt, but then is like debt is evil. That's pounded in your head, especially when you listen to different voices in the financial world. Nobody's like, debt's awesome. But you even have to step back and be like, wait, am I being influenced by those voices? Is that bringing more stress and guilt and shame that I've done something wrong? A lot of times there are things that we did wrong. I look back at some decisions. It was just like, yeah, we kind of had to pay for that for a year or two, but we did our very best. We were always doing our best, and you can't let people's philosophy of even debt become an idol. And that's what's interesting is that you can actually be debt-free, have this giant savings account, super stable, and money is still an idol for you, because you're so obsessed with being debt-free, and you can be paranoid about making purchases because you're so scared of getting in debt.
It's like Jesus said, it's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom than it is for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. Like it really can become such an idol that it prohibits you from really being able to engage in a relationship with the Lord and really be able to sell all, like Jesus said.
And trust God to meet your needs.
Right.
Here's an example. It's like we face this, I felt all the time with like cars, like vehicles.
Oh my gosh.
And we're always in that debate. Do we like go into more debt to have a reliable vehicle, or do we get the clunker to be out of debt? And there's voices on both sides of that. We have always leaned toward it was better to have a reliable vehicle and not have that stress. Like there's just few things that are as stressful as having car trouble. But we tried to be balanced in that. We didn't go get the Lexus. It was our first car. What was our first car? Like a Kia Soul or something?
It was a Kia.
I mean, it was like pretty affordable.
And then we got a Honda Odyssey that was pretty
used.
rough.
Used vehicles, try to go over the gently used. Like we try to find balance in that, have a low car payment, but
just
like
common sense.
But I've interacted with people that are so scared of being in debt that it's just like they can't even fathom getting a car with a loan. It's just like, dude, sometimes it's not worth the trouble to stress over that. And that's what I mean is like, if you get obsessed with being debt free, you will always feel shameful in a situation where sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you got roof leaks. Sometimes you got things going on with your house and the debt happens.
Well, and then the debt-free people, the answer is to go work more jobs.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to my whole thing of just like, when you're doing that with little kids, they're like, your kids will thank you because you won't have debt. And I'm like, or they'll be really sad because you literally weren't in their life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's probably controversial for all the Dave Ramsey lovers out there, but like literally that time will never be back.
Yeah.
If you are working, and Ben worked a lot of jobs and we'll talk about that, but he actually was around as well. We did strike a good balance for it. I don't know. Is it really that worth it?
Yeah.
You get home from work and then you go to your next job and then you work all weekend and you literally see your kids for 3 hours every week. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that worth it? I don't know.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Dave Ramsey. We can go ahead and talk more about this next section, which is how we got out of debt, because we pretty much are debt free and it took time. So we've been talking a little bit about how we carried our poverty like internally and how we worked through some of that, learned gratitude, learned contentment. What were some of the practical tips, Jessica, of just like how we were thrifty and stuff?
I think definitely we did not go on very many vacations. If we did, we were, absolute cheapest possible.
Yeah.
A lot of it was camping involved. We did a lot of camping. But I think especially for me as a new mom, and this is something that I laugh about as, I guess, like a birth and baby influencer. When I was having babies, we were poor. And so I did not buy very much baby gear.
Yeah.
Not even because I wasn't interested in it. Maybe I would have been, but we did not have the money to do it.
Yeah.
And so I was very pragmatic. And I would say 90% of the things that we had were secondhand. I bought all of our clothes secondhand for the most part, except for the stuff that my mom got for the girls, which was super wonderful and very much helpful. But in general, if I were to buy something, it would be secondhand or it would be as frugal as humanly possible. And I think just in general, taking a step back from kind of the capitalistic and just we have to have all the best things and all the new things, which honestly, I see even just so much more with new moms today.
Yeah.
It's such a huge growing industry that it puts so much pressure on moms of like, you have to have this and you gotta, all
tech. There's a lot more tech.
Oh my gosh. Like it's overwhelming to me and I'm not even having kids. And I'm like, yo, you don't need half of this.
Yeah.
Like literally diapers, onesies, breastfeeding pillow, carrier. Done. Like that's all you need for like the first 4 months, like legit. Maybe a bassinet would be the other thing, but like, that's it. That's all you need. And I don't know. And I think that was actually born out of me having such restrictions with our money that I had to learn how to care for our babies without all the tech. We had a video camera thing for a little while, but then it broke. And so we ended up just using one of those like walkie-talkie looking monitors for our baby. Like there was just like a lot of stuff that we did that it was not mainstream. It was very simplistic. Then the other thing I would say would be we used cloth diapers.
Yeah. Which was an upfront cost. Well, you registered for them.
I registered
for
them. So I got them for free from my whoever got them for us for a registry. And then, and we cloth diapered like our first 2 kids. We did not cloth diaper our third because honestly, by the time you have 3 babies, you're like, done. I can't, and I'm done. I can't.
I think at that point we could finally afford diapers, but we couldn't.
We could, kind of afford diapers.
We saved so much money, didn't it?
So much money. So like legit, there was a lot of sacrifices we had to make when we made this decision. Obviously, food definitely had to, we did not eat out. And that was one thing that I think was probably hardest. We had a lot of friends who loved to go out to eat and stuff. And like, we just didn't. Like, we found other ways. I hosted people at our house. Yeah. We found ways to be able to still socialize without it having to cost money. That was just something we just had to do.
With our faith, we always gave. Mm-hmm. And I think the spiritual experience of giving was like, it built something really strong in us. Because when you're under all that strain, like you're in survival mode and you want to cut things. And like, it was such an act of death and worship to like give up something that's precious and like keep giving, keep being generous. And that really built something in us that we still carry with us. Is just like, if there's any way to like quickly die to your love of money, it's like literally give it away. And you'll start to see things internally change. And then lastly, before we talk about like some practical steps that got us out of debt, is like, we tried to always strike a balance of the gently used cars, not the new cars, but not like the clunkers. We got the stuff that, we had to get a loan, but we weren't like, it wasn't crazy. I remember when we bought our second house, it was a stretch financially, but it was definitely reasonable. Everything we tried to do had to strike that balance. I remember when it was eventually just like, okay, we're doing a good job, like being balanced but okay, how do we actually like get out?
Because at that point we had some credit card debt.
Yeah.
That we had to.
Yeah. And a more expensive house and a more expensive car. Like it was starting to accumulate. We had credit card debt that wasn't getting smaller. We had car loans, we had our house,
because
we had student loans.
We had to use the credit card sometimes for emergencies.
Yeah,
I mean, that was legitimately, we did not have savings.
Yeah.
If we had something break, like our washing machine,
I remember that. Yeah.
we had to use our credit card to buy a marketplace or washing machine or something like that.
No, there were other appliances. That one, that we had to go to a store. We got something.
Oh, that's right. Like,
I can't remember what appliance it was, but yeah, we usually try to get appliances off Facebook Marketplace. But the point,
oh no, the Facebook Marketplace is the one that we have currently.
it's still working.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Still working.
It's like
we got for $200.
What I think what you're getting at is like, I remember us trying to do our best to whittle down that credit card debt. It would just like, we'd be almost done with our credit card debt. And then like, boom, we had like some house repair. We had some appliance go out. It was just like, oh my gosh. And that balance would just skyrocket back up. And I remember it was just like, we have got to get out of this hamster wheel. That's when we finally started to get a plan. And it all started with us, this big discussion of just like, what are our goals? Like, what do we actually, you don't want to be just carefree and just be like, oh, money's not important. It's like, go with the flow. Like if you live like that and with a family, like you will just accumulate so much debt. You have to have a plan. We started to actually think more long-term and not just month to month. And that's when Jessica and I started an annual budget instead of a monthly budget. Mm-hmm. That changed the game. Because then we were seeing, when you're thinking a year out, you're like, oh yeah, like every year I've got that big auto insurance bill because we do ours every 6 months or whatever. Oh yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like Christmas. That's why we accumulate debt in Christmas, is we don't plan for Christmas. And so we started planning for Christmas in the summer. And once you start thinking in an annual basis, you're able to start making adjustments for those unexpected, or not unexpected, but like irregular expenses. And that like totally changed the game on a practical level. And then we could actually start thinking beyond 1 year and start making some goals of like, how can we get out of debt and start doing something with our finances instead of just being in survival mode. The next thing that did, having that annual budget, if you remember, Jess, that was when we realized I needed to get more jobs. Either you've got to go back to work or I've got to do something. And that's when I started working after school programs, started working in my summers. One of the luxuries of being a teacher is you can do that. And that was like a game changer. Mm-hmm. You know, bringing in a few thousand more dollars, like that totally changed the game. But
it really wasn't a whole lot like on a month to month basis. But when you looked at the actual amount of money that you brought in for the yearly, it covered all the random irregular expenses that were putting us in debt. And yeah, I mean, that was great.
Because that's why we were in debt. It wasn't because we were living this lavish lifestyle. It was that we were just in survival mode every month. And then if something unexpected comes, we just couldn't pay for it.
No, we couldn't pay for it.
And so once I started bringing in a little extra dough, we were able to do that and adjust. And that just totally changed. I remember is when I started working those extra jobs that I actually paid off some of the debt, which is exactly what Dave Ramsey says. It was like, there's so many things about Dave Ramsey that annoy me, of just like his militancy, and just like, he'll just make you feel like crap for just having any debt. But like some people need some of that militancy. And so we started looking at the Dave Ramsey baby steps. And I would say overall now we use like a flexible, balanced approach to like Ramsey. And if you've never studied Dave Ramsey, I don't like buy all his products and go deep and all this stuff. I just like look at the baby steps and try to like kind of stay on target. But baby step 1 is saving $1,000 for a starter emergency fund. Baby step 2 is pay off your debt using the debt snowball. So like,
that was probably the biggest thing that was helpful for us, was the debt snowball.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people are in that stage, like it takes years to do that.
I mean, like just the concept of it.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, when you have a lot of debt, you're like, what do I do? Where do I even begin? And can you explain a little bit more?
There's 2 different theories when you're trying to pay off consumer debt. Economically speaking, it's more logical to pay off the highest interest first. Usually your credit card, because it's such high interest that it's accruing constantly. But Dave Ramsey is opposite. He says you should have those small victories. Let's say you have a high rate credit card and a credit card that has a lower rate, but it's a lower balance. Pay off the one that has the lowest balance. Because once you get that small victory, you've not only one, you feel better, but you also take whatever you were paying to get that credit card paid off and roll it into the next thing you're going to work on paying off.
And then you roll all that into the next thing.
That's what they call the snowball.
Yeah.
So I think for us, actually, like I can't even remember.
We had like a couple different balances. And
I don't even remember what we paid off first, but.
And then we paid off our credit cards first. Then we worked on the cars over time. That was more recent.
But we totally did the snowball. Like we would put, it didn't matter what the interest rate is. That's what he says. Don't even look at the interest rate. prioritize the lowest balance. And that just truly helped us. And you're more motivated because you're like, if you have this giant $17,000 credit card balance, you're just like, oh my gosh.
I'm going to pay that off in like 10 years.
Yeah. But if you pay off your $1,500 furniture debt you got or
we had
whatever.
one of those too that we
I remember one time we needed a couch or something, and you just get those small victories and it really makes a difference. The next baby step is save 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. That almost seems impossible, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at.
And then we have money saved. I don't think it's necessarily 3 to 6.
So anyway, and then it's like, then you start focusing on your retirement. Then you start focusing on your kids' college fund. Then you pay off your house early. And then the whole goal, and this is what I like about Dave Ramsey's, his system is that it's not all just about getting out of debt. It's about being in a place where you actually can build wealth and give to others. And that's one of the cool things that you get if you're able to get out of debt and have excess. It's not about just you just like living your flashy lifestyle. Like you're in a place then to be supportive for your family, maybe when they're starting out in life, or be able to give generously to others. It's all about you taking the handcuffs of your debt, getting serious about taking those handcuffs off, and start developing a plan.
So I think in summary, it sounds like we're saying you need to make decisions, financial decisions that are more values-based versus money-based.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you need to be smart with how you handle your money.
Yeah.
And when you can, and when don't just, once you start getting money, start blowing it on stuff. Cause like we were saying, we saw once we started making more money, our lifestyle started increasing. We were like, whoa.
Yeah.
We need to deal with the debt issue here before we start increasing our lifestyle. And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble is then when they start making money, they're like, sweet, I can finally go on this vacation. I can do this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, actually, when you start making money, you need to deal with the debt that you accrued when you were poor. And that was something that we were able to do. We own our own business, and that's definitely helped us out with actually being able to achieve our goals with our business and all of that. If we had a ton of personal financial strain, I mean, it would really be difficult to have a business. But then I think what I'm hearing you say with Dave Ramsey is that, you went and got jobs, but it wasn't like then we were so obsessed with the debt snowball and so obsessed with getting out of debt that we did what I hear Dave say, which is like, everyone in your house needs to be working as many jobs as possible. Family time is not important. And it's just like, I really disagree with that, actually. And I think you and I were able to strike a good balance and work hard, but also be realistic. And also just make sure that we have the right things being prioritized.
Well, I remember post Dave Ramsey had it where he went on this big rant of some guy buying a boat. There was a guy in the comments. It was like, yeah, I'm not rich, but like buying that boat was like the greatest thing I've ever done for my family. And it's like, we've made like infinite memories from having that boat. And that's an example of balance. Is like, there were decisions we made in our lives. It was like, it wasn't the Dave Ramsey financial decision, but I'd have no regrets because like you said, you don't get those years back. It's a slippery slope because you could, if you're always using the excuse of balance, well, I'm going to be balanced. You're going to go out to eat a little bit more than you should. The key is to have a plan. And that's what I see in a lot of young couples making a lot of poor financial decisions is they finally have a career. They're both working, no kids. So they go buy the $80,000 car. They buy the super nice house. They're like, rack up all this. They're basically just ruining their chances of having options in the past. In the future. Like when you have kids, you want the option. If you want to have mom stay home, you want that option. It's not that it's right for everybody, but if you are so strapped with debt, you just don't have as many options.
That's true.
So you want to think about the future. Like as soon as you start settling down and have an income, like talk about what do we see ourselves in a year, 5 years, where do we see things 10 years? Like in our age with our kids, you actually think like college is not that far away. And
it's not.
Like their weddings is not, that far. I'm just like, oh my gosh, how do people do this?
Well, we have 3 girls too.
It's different. But the point is like everything in our culture is like fast and just like in the moment. And you're not really taught to think long-term. But once you do, you're going to second guess, again, that $70,000 car that looks really attractive that you definitely
when you're 25 and don't have kids.
Yeah, you can afford it with your new hot career. But are you going to be really excited about that, $800 car payment whenever you've got kids to feed? So you need to think more futuristically.
I think the last thing I'll say too is just remembering that, I think a lot of people, they'll use the family card, I want to make all these memories for my kids. I want to treat them right. Especially if you grew up in an impoverished home, like I want to be able to give them everything I didn't have. But the thing is that kids, you can make memories without having a lot of money.
Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, having all these lavish vacations and all these things that we all see on social media and we believe is the way to have our kids have a happy upbringing is just false. Like kids are most happy when you're together as a family, when you're doing things that are making memories, and you can do that anywhere for free.
Anywhere.
You can do it for free.
Yeah.
Go find a really cool place to drive to. Yeah, you have to pay for the money for the gas. That's what we did, is we found really cool ways to make memories as a family, literally as cheaply as possible or free. And our kids have, they talk about all of the fun, crazy things we did with them when they were little to this day. And I think that it really is almost us kind of bucking up against our culture that has perpetuated what we started out at the beginning with all this consumer debt, where we are in a generation where we cannot afford even just some of the most basic stuff. Yeah. And we're also being told that in order to have a good life, you have to have all these things.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it's like, hold up. No, you can actually have a good life and not buy all of the Amazon hacks and go on all of the Disney vacations and everything. And I just think that that's something that's really important to consider.
Yeah. I want to end with just like a charge of just about being a good steward. Like Jesus told this parable about a master who gave talents for guys to then steward and invest in. So like currency, and some were one was given 1, the other's given like 5, the other 10. I can't remember the exact amounts. The issue in that parable wasn't about how much every person got, because it wasn't equal. It was about, did it increase? Did they steward it well? One guy's, attitude toward the masters, and thinking he was too harsh, he didn't steward it well.
He was the one with the 1 talent.
Yeah. The guy that was given a lot, stewarded it, and it brought increase. The whole parable is about stewardship. And that's kind of like the charge that everybody needs to hear, is whether you've got $1 or $100 or $100,000, it's what you do with that really matters. And you're wasting your time being frustrated at the system. Because as we've talked about today, the system is kind of set up for a lot of people to fail, honestly. Mm-hmm. But so you can get bitter or you can get better. You can feel bad about yourself and your financial situation, or you can talk as a couple and get a plan. But most importantly, you've got to find joy and contentment and gratitude, because that's something that Dave Ramsey, nobody can make you feel that.
Money does not make you happy.
Right. You have to
Everyone
make the choice.
That now.
You have to make the choice to find gratitude, be content. And everything from there is, honestly, that's the hardest thing. If you can decide to do that as a family, the other stuff is just like X's and O's and just making a plan and sticking with it, And all that applies to rich people as well. Be a good steward. Don't just frivolously blow all your money. Think of what you could do with your excess if you had a plan and paid off debts or thought about goals and how to give back. That's a great gift to have. And so don't just squander it.
Yeah, I agree. Money is just one of those topics that can be really kind of a hot button for a lot of people. Yeah. So hopefully hearing us talk a little bit about our personal experience with having a little and having more than a little would be just inspirational and helpful for you as you navigate your money in 2025, because, we're living kind of in a stressful time with money, but we all are working really hard to steward what we have and to find joy in the process. Thank you so much for listening today. It would mean so much to us if you left a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you heard this.
And let us know your thoughts on today's episode by leaving a comment on Spotify or YouTube, where you can also watch these episodes.